Everybody, so welcome back to another episode of Colton Posey Fishing. So if you're new here, make sure to like, subscribe. It helps me out a whole lot. I'm always putting out new content when it comes to bass fishing. As always, if you have any questions or anything you want to add, or you just want to chat fishing, drop a comment down below. So what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be discussing exactly kind of like what happened the other day. I had a friend come down from Missouri. He's been a long time subscriber, but either way, you know, we went fishing and the day was completely different than it typically is. So it wasn't one of those, you know, bright blue sunny days where it's just real nice, light breeze, kind of cool. It wasn't anything like that. It was cold, miserable, windy, cloudy. And when I say windy, I'm talking 35+ mile-an-hour winds. So, you know, it was pretty rough. But either way, we're going to talk about exactly the thought process, everything that I did to help you throughout this, I don't know, I guess you would call it fall to winter transition, but you know, it's kind of more like we're already in winter. So either way, stay tuned. This is something you don't want to miss. So let's talk about the breakdown of the day. So, you know, we show up to the lake and immediately when we get there, the wind's not that bad. There's some breakup in the clouds and stuff like that. So, you know, we've got a little bit of sun. And at the time, we were fishing the blueback herring lake. So with that being said, most of the time, if you ever watched any of my blueback herring videos, you know that when it's sunny, the herring like to come up. When it's cloudy, the herring like to go down. It's actually vice versa with threadfin shad and stuff like that. But either way, immediately when we get there, you know, we're running and gunning some points on the north side of the lake. So what I mean by the north side is, I don't mean like we run up north on the north end of the lake. I mean like these main lake points and stuff that are on the northern side of the lake is exactly what we were fishing. And you know, it's one of those things like I talked about in a video of mine a while back. You start seeing a lot of people on these points and stuff like that, and it becomes very difficult to catch these fish. So, you know, after fishing a few of those and we found some fish, then we automatically knew, especially when we were seeing them follow our baits and stuff and not committing anything like that. We did some changing up as far as baits and stuff like that, and still they would not hit. And the weekend before that, I'd really noticed, you know, just point after point after point on the north side of the lake, everybody was hitting those points. So, you know, automatically in my mind, that tells me these fish are pressured. Now, with that being said, we make some slight adjustments. What I mean by that is, a lot of times it's not typically your bait. So, you know, hitting those north sides of our northern points on the lake, we probably could have made some drastic bait changes, maybe some finesse style presentation, stuff like that, and maybe would have caught a couple fish on each individual point that we stopped at. But at the same time, we kind of didn't want to do that. We wanted to catch multiple fish, right? So we make that adjustment is what we do. So instead of changing the entirety of what we're planning on doing that day, we just fish the opposite end. So, you know, if there's a point over here on the north side of the lake and there's a point on the south side of the lake, we transfer over to the south side of the lake. And that's really when it paid off. We get on the south side of the lake and we're getting multiple bites. We're getting, you know, good sized bites, especially for up there. It's typically a spotted bass fishery. So, you know, with a spotted bass, you know, a good 3-pound spotted bass, that is a big spotted bass. Anything over 3 is just a big spotted bass, period, you know, unless you're fishing something like Buller's Bar or something like that. But, you know, we make those adjustments on the south end of the lake and we fish those southern points like we're fishing the northern points, like we would typically fish the points that, you know, I fished my whole life. So once we start making those adjustments, we start catching fish, multiple fish, bigger fish, small fish. It didn't really matter, everything kind of in between. But it became very, very obvious to us that the other side of the lake had been fished very, very hard. So we stuck to those southern areas, those southern points, the typical areas that you would hit on your lake. But most of the southern points that we hit is areas that, you know, not a whole lot of people were fishing. A lot of it was areas that I'd never fished in my life. But, you know, we went off of that pattern. So we go on that south side of the lake and we start catching fish, you know, on the bends of the points, on the sides, on the edges of the points. Caught maybe 1 or 2, you know, right on the point, which those are typically going to feed. And then just kind of run that all around the lake on the southern side until the wind got up. Now, when the wind got up, it was, 25 to 35 mile an hour winds, extremely, extremely tough. Not necessarily to keep your boat there, but to just make a cast with anything. It was extremely tough. Now, the other issue was these fish were still sitting 15 to anywhere between 15 to 5 foot in the water column. So somewhere in that range, they were always there. So, throwing those lighter, like 1/4 ounce and stuff like that, because this is the time you're gonna have to slow down. Throwing those types of baits is almost impossible. I mean, you're just either gonna backlash, you're not gonna be accurate. Something's gonna go wrong. Typically, I ended up getting a big knot in my line, my spinning reel. So, with that being said, it can be very, very difficult when the wind gets up like that, but we make another transition. Now, the transition that we made, we knew the day before there was a lot of rain. So, when we first get there, we're expecting to just run and hit run-ins. Unfortunately, there was only just a few run-ins that were actually running in the lake. So, the ground had absorbed everything pretty quickly, which we hadn't had rain in a lot. We've been in that fall drought. I'm sure you have been too. But, we make those transitions into the quarter mouth of the creek. So what I mean by the quarter mouth of the creek is if this is the beginning of the creek where you drive into the creek, that quarter mark. So maybe to like the first secondary point we were fishing, but we were fishing old run-in. So not any type of run-in. There was no water coming in, but it was like that ditch that I talked about in the ditch fishing video, earlier last week, I think. But either way, we fish those areas, fish that ditch, and we start getting bit again so we can run that pattern. Now, they're not better fish. They're not these, huge 3 pound, 4 pound, 5 pound spotted bass or anything like that. But we made a transition that we decided we wasn't going to try to fight the wind and stuff on the main lake, and then moved into the quarter mouths of the creeks and started picking apart another pattern. Now, let's talk about the baits that we use to catch these fish. Now, the first one I want to talk about is where we were getting the bigger bites. It's a bigger bait. Everything's going to be bigger on this aspect. But either way, the setup's the most important. This is the Tyco series by Thunderhawk Lures. Very expensive rod. I say very expensive, $300 rod. But I absolutely love these. Carbon. It does have a it is very sensitive. Let's just put it that way. With it being very sensitive, you're gonna have to get used to it. I'm used to running those $100 to $150 rods, and there's nothing wrong with them at all. But this right here, you're gonna feel everything. And when you're running fluorocarbon line, there's no stretch with a swim bait and stuff like that. It's easy to miss a lot of fish because you're gonna feel that initial bite that you typically wouldn't with other rods and stuff like that. So, I'm just saying, if you go to a very, very sensitive rod, be careful with swim baits. You may have to backfall to monofilament if you can get away with it. That way, you can kind of get that cadence down to where you're not missing near as many fish. But once you get used to it, it's no huge deal. But a 7'3" medium heavy action rod. That's the most important thing, is that medium heavy action rod, because these Swimbait Heads, they got these big hooks. So if I'm making a super long cast, and that's one of the key details to fishing this week, last week too, is making those super long casts, because the lake is super clear. It's clean, clear water. Okay, everywhere that I've been has been clean, clear water. We hadn't had any kind of rain hardly, except for those few days, which is why we wanted to target the run-ins. But with that being said, I'm making super long casts because I'm noticing the longer casts that I make, the more bites that I get in return. But also, those short casts, these fish are following it for a long ways, and once they get about 20 foot from the boat, they're going down. So they're used to seeing this stuff. Now, if I'm making, a super long cast, they can follow that bait for 40, 50 foot, and then nothing happens, and then they eventually bite it before they get that 20 foot mark away from the boat, if you get what I'm saying. But I suggest a high speed gear ratio, 7.5 to 1, 7.2 to 1, 7.3 to 1, whatever you prefer. But I prefer a higher gear ratio. The reason is because a lot of times with these swim baits, especially during the winter, they're going to come up behind it and they're going to hit it hard. And when they do, it's going to knock slack in your line. With this, I can take up that line super fast, pull into them, and draw that hook straight through their mouth. Now, I'm running 15-pound fluorocarbon. Monofilament's fine. Whatever you prefer to use, copolymer, it doesn't matter. Just understand the reason I'm doing the fluorocarbon. There's not a lot of stretch. I'm making super long casts, So, you know, with that 0 stretch, the medium heavy rod, it just works out perfect where I can get good hook sets on those very, very long casts. The Swimbait head, this is going to be the 1/4 ounce Strike King Squadron head. The 1/4 ounce laser sharp, eagle claw, whatever y'all have heard me talk about. All this stuff is going to be linked down in the description, as always. That's another great one. Use whatever swimbait head you prefer, but the whole, like I always say, it's not exactly what I use, it's why I chose to use what I'm using. So either way, let's talk about the Swimbait. This is the 3.75 inch Rage Swimmer by Strike King. Now there's 3 different colors that I use by Strike King with the Rage Swimmers, and they're all for specific reasons. This one right here that I just showed you, this is called the Ghost Shad. The reason that I choose it is translucent. So it's not completely translucent like where you can see through it, but it has that fade. It's kind of got that ghost look, it kind of goes with the name. It's not clear, but it's not full of contrast or anything like that like you would typically see from other swim baits and stuff. So fishing that clean, clear water on super sunny days, I get a lot more bites because it's something that looks very, very natural. But I highly suggest the Rage Swimmers. The only reason that I say that over the Kitex or anything else, the Rage Swimmer ribs, and I've talked about this for years, are pointed forward. So the next time you're looking at swim baits and stuff for that late fall, throughout winter, early spring, I highly suggest checking these out. Pay close attention to them. Just look at them. The ribs are pointed forward. In return, gives you more resistance. You can slow that bait down even more and still have that kind of wide wobble tail kick out of your swim bait, which is going to mimic those fish being cold. Now the other 2 colors that I use with the Rage Swimmer, one's the electric shad. I typically use that electric shad if I'm targeting fish that are eating a lot of thread fin. They're typically going to be aggressive. It's it may be clean, clear water, kind of partly cloudy, something like that. You do kind of want that cloud break, in my opinion, when you're choosing some type of contrast in the water. It just helps them identify that bait from a good distance away, because like I said, you're going to be making long casts. And then the other one's just that pearl white. Pearl white's extremely hard to beat, especially during the shad spawn, stuff like that. I typically don't even put down the pearl white when it gets close to that shad spawn stage, because they're just focused on the shad as all they're doing during that stage. So the pearl white's great. I still use it during winter, especially on super cloudy days. Super cloudy, low light conditions, the pearl white's perfect. Now how I was using this bait, I would throw this bait out there, make a super long cast. As soon as it hits the water, I'm crawling it. Unfortunately, I'm crawling it. Now, if I'm reeling it and I'm getting a bump and they're not committing to it, I'll speed it up for a second and then slow it back down, kind of like it's trying to get away from them. And a lot of times that'll trigger them to commit to it, especially if they think something's off. They've got pressured all year long. So, doing little subtle actions like that can trigger a lot more bites. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes it is what it is. 3 or 4 boats hit that area before you got there. So, you're just going to struggle with it. But either way, let's talk about the other swim bait. All right, so the other swim bait that I want to talk about, and this is, I'm going to show you the setup. This is the most important thing: 7-foot medium moderate or 6'10" medium moderate action. I wasn't throwing this specific rod. I was throwing the Elite Series rod, which is in my box, but I still got the underspin tied on it from when we went to Bear. But either way, I was throwing this swim bait in particular on the Elite Series by Thunderhawk. But either way, the 7-foot medium moderate action, 6'10" medium moderate action, anything like that is going to be your great go-to, because that rod's going to load up very, very well on those long casts, because you're still going to be making long casts with this. But with the spinning rod, you're not jerking the bait. You kind of want to pull and reel really fast, and it will drive that small hook into the fish's mouth. But I'm running 10-pound braided line to an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader. It never hurts to drop to 6, but 8 for me is kind of like that good all around. I can kind of use it anywhere. I can use it on Tennessee River, I can use it on Smith Lake, I can use it on another Highland Reservoir, or whatever. But 8 pounds kind of all that good all around. You can fish it around brush and stuff like that. You just kind of got to be careful, because it's 8-pound test. 6'2" to 1 gear ratio spinning reel is what I suggest. Is 13 fish K-line A But whatever brand you choose, I highly suggest, if you're going to be running just a technique specific swim bait rod, like this is just my finesse swim bait rod, the Elite Series is just my finesse swim bait rod. I've got two 13 Fish K-Line A's on both of them, and that's just because the 6:2 to 1 gear ratio, good drag system. I can make those super long casts, and I can take up a lot of line really fast, okay? But either way, the head that I want to talk about, this was the all-terrain Smallie Smasher. Y'all heard me talk about this multiple times, in 3/8 ounce. I'm kind of doing the same thing, okay, but I'm going to use this to get down just a little bit more. So those fish that are hanging out in that, you know, 15 to 20 foot range, they're still going to be feeding up. What they do is they sit down there and they look straight up. When that bait ball comes up to them, they're going to go up and try to pin those shad up against the surface, or the herring up against the surface. Now, I've seen them come all the way from 30, 35 foot to do this, but at the same time, you kind of got to mimic that bait range. So if the fish are sitting at 15 and the shad are sitting at 5 and I'm making a super long cast, I can use that 3/8 ounce to make that super long cast. I can keep my rod tip at about 1 o'clock or 11 o'clock. Either way, I'm keeping that rod tip up, and then I can reel that bait. Now, I'm gonna move a little bit faster with this. You know, I'm not trying to, you know, reel it necessarily like it's summer, but, you know, I'm kind of, you know, at that little bit stronger cadence than you would with that 1/4 ounce, because I want to keep that bait in that 5 to 6, well, 5 to 8, I would say, range. Now, the bait that I was using, this is one of the most important things. This is the Rapala Crush City Mare. You've heard me talk about this multiple times. It's chartreuse color. I started out with the albino color, run out of them, swapped right over to the chartreuse color. Didn't make a bit of difference. They wanted it. But either way, no matter what you decide to do, understand, long cast, I'm hitting the opposite sides of the lake where people are not really fishing. I'm catching multiple fish, I'm catching bigger fish. We ended up probably about 12 to 13 pounds with the fish that we caught. It's been taking about 16, 17 to win out there. So, you know, just mess around, go to the lake, look at it as it's your first time being out on that lake, even though it may be the millionth time you've been on that lake, and treat it as such, and just go fishing, and I guarantee you're going to bump into more fish. But either way, guys, if the video helped you at all, make sure to like, subscribe. It helps me out a whole lot. Check out the description. My sponsor stuff is all in the description. All the product links and stuff are in the description. You can click on it, take it straight there. You know, we got the shop open now, so you know, you can get merchandise. You can click the shop, it'll carry you to different websites and stuff where you can order these baits and stuff like that. All that stuff helps me out a whole lot, and I really appreciate you. But, you know, if you got any questions or anything you want to add, or you just want to talk fishing, drop a comment down below. I love hearing from you guys. Thank you to everybody who consistently watches the channel. It helps me out a whole lot. It's really encouraging. I hope I've helped a few of you out. I'm sure I've helped out more or less, I don't know, but either way, I really appreciate it, guys, and I'll see you next time.